Before I dive into this story, let me ask you something fun. Where are you watching from right now? Are you in a big city like New York or Los Angeles, or maybe a cozy small town in the Midwest? I always get excited hearing about your spots, so drop your city in the comments. Okay, now buckle up, because what I'm about to share is something I never thought would happen to me. What my husband's boss told me during one meeting didn't just shock me, it broke something deep in my heart, but it also helped me see things in a whole new way that I'll always remember. It all started on a Thursday afternoon, one of those grey, rainy days when everything feels heavy and quiet. My husband asked me to come with him to a meeting at his office. He said it was just a normal thing about finishing up a new work project, but really he wanted me there because he knew I was good at figuring out what people were really thinking at 65 years old. I've had lots of times where the stuff people didn't say out loud was more important than what they did say. He liked that about me, and I liked being part of his work life sometimes. The office was clean and fancy with big glass windows that had streaks showing faint pictures of the city outside inside. It smelled a little like coffee and shiny wood. My husband sat next to me, his hand resting loosely on the chair arm, tapping a steady beat that only I saw. Across from us was his boss Michael, a tall guy in his late 60s with hair turning grey at the sides and eyes that looked like they carried too much stuff. I had met him before at company dinners with nice chats over fancy drinks, but this time was different today. There was no laughing or easy talk. Michael's eyes moved between us like he was deciding how much to tell. His voice was calm and steady, but underneath it there was something shaky, a kind of weakness he couldn't fully hide at first. The talk went around the usual stuff: project times, money plans, the same old words that filled the room like old air. But then in the breaks between words I noticed it. His jaw got tight. His eyes stayed on me a tiny bit too long, and suddenly everything felt different. I remember holding my hands together, feeling the coolness of my wedding ring pressing into my skin, like it was reminding me of the life I had made, of the promises I had kept. But in that moment, I also felt a curious feeling stirring up something inside me. Said this meeting was about to go somewhere new and unknown. Michael leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, and for a quick second the sound of rain outside seemed to go away. He said my name, not in the far-off boss-like way of talking to a worker's wife, but in a softer, more personal way. It surprised me. My husband didn't seem to catch it, but I did. Every part of the word hung in the air, like breakable glass. He started talking about his job life, about the many years of wanting to succeed and giving things up. His words made pictures of late nights, missed special days, and how winning can sometimes feel empty. His eyes looked at me as he admitted things I knew he hadn't even told his own family. It wasn't about numbers or work papers anymore. It was about feeling sorry and weirdly even. Though I didn't know why he was telling these secrets to me, I felt my breath stop. It wasn't about romance, not in the clear way. It was something deeper, more upsetting. Here was a guy who looked strong and in charge to everyone else, but here was showing the breaks in his tough shell to me, of all people, my husband's wife. I nodded, gently giving small words to show I heard him, my voice low, so I wouldn't break the thin line of truth coming across the desk. My husband may be busy thinking about the work part, didn't notice the change like I did. He didn't hear the shaken Michael's voice, or see the shine of something real and open in his eyes, but I did, and in that quiet knowing something moved in me too, not like being drawn to him, but like a link, a weird pull of feeling for him, and getting it, the kind that happens when two people touch hearts without expecting it. It was upsetting, and yet I couldn't look away as the meeting went on. The rain outside got stronger, hitting against the glass almost like it was matching the storm growing quietly in my chest. When we finally got up to go, Michael's last words were simple, almost normal, but I could feel the heaviness behind them. He thanked us for coming, but his eyes stayed on mine just a second longer, and in that look, I knew this wasn't finished. Walking out of that office, holding my husband's hand, I felt split inside. My heart was heavy, but also buzzing with questions I couldn't name. What had just happened in that room? Why had he picked me to hear his real thoughts? And why did it feel like I was holding a secret I didn't ask for, but couldn't drop that night? As I lay in bed next to my husband listening to the steady sound of his breathing, I stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of it pushing down. Something had changed in me, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to fight it or figure it out that night. After the meeting, I hardly slept. The sound of rain had come home with me, tapping against the windows, like a never-ending reminder of the talk that still stuck in my head. My husband slept deeply next to me, his breathing steady and nice. But I found no niceness in my own thoughts. I kept going over Michael's words, his eyes, the breakable way he had let bits of himself show through the cracks. It felt like I was carrying a load that wasn't mine, that had been given to me without warning. The next morning, sunlight came through the curtains, pushing away the heaviness of the storm outside, but not the one inside me. I moved through the kitchen, quietly pouring coffee, watching the steam curl up and disappear, wishing my worry could do the same. My husband kissed me fast before going to the office, already chatting about work times and meetings, his mind on other things. I nodded and smiled, though inside my thoughts were still stuck on the meeting from the day before. By noon, I found myself unable to fight the pull. I told myself it was just being curious, that I just wanted to understand what had really happened in that office. But honestly, I think I needed to check if that moment was real or just something I made up in my head. With unsure steps, I decided to stop by my husband's office. I told myself it was nothing big, that I might bring lunch or just say hi, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. The building looked different in the daytime, the glass shining bright in the sun. My footsteps echoed as I walked down the hall, and when I got to Michael's office door, I stopped. For a long moment I thought about turning back, but before I could choose, the door opened from inside, and there he was. Michael looked surprised to see me, but not upset. His face got softer, and he moved aside, waving me in. The office was warm with sunlight now, the city outside, the glass looking clean from the rain, like it had been washed overnight. I stepped inside, my heart beating hard. He offered me a seat, and for a moment neither of us talked. The quiet went on, but it wasn't weird, it was heavy, like both of us knew words would change something, but we couldn't stop them from coming. Finally, he broke it. "I didn't mean to put a load on you yesterday," he said quietly, his eyes on mine. "I don't usually talk like that, not to anyone." I swallowed, not sure what to say. His voice had the same shake I had heard before, a mix of feeling sorry and wanting something not for me, but for something gone in his life, something he had hidden under years of trying to get ahead. "You didn't put a load on me," I replied, my voice softer than I meant. "You just surprised me." His lips turned into the smallest smile. With a bit of sadness, he leaned back, breathing out like he had been holding his breath since the day before. "When you get to my age," he said, "you start thinking about what really counts, and sometimes it's not the things you worked for your whole life." I felt a pain deep in my chest. At 65, I got exactly what he meant. The years stretching behind you, full of choices you can't change, words you can't take back. I thought of my own life, the paths I'd taken, the moments I'd let go by quietly because I was too scared to grab them. His truth was upsetting because it showed my own hidden thoughts for the first time. I let myself look at him not as my husband's boss, but as a man, someone open with mistakes, looking for something. And in that look, something unsaid went between us. Not romance, not wanting, but knowing each other. Two people seeing the heaviness of years and the price of choices. I moved a little in my chair, suddenly knowing how close this talk was bringing us. I wanted to keep it safe, full of respect, but the truth between us was pulling me into deeper spots. Michael talked again, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "Yesterday, when I looked at you, I saw someone who got it. I don't know why. Maybe it was how you listened. Maybe it was just the right time. But it felt like I could finally be real with someone." His words hit me hard. I felt the air get thicker, like the walls were holding their breath. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to make his pain easier, To tell him it was okay, another part was scared of where this link might go. I finally said sometimes all we need is someone to hear us. He nodded slowly, his eyes shining with something unsaid for a moment. We sat there quietly, two people connected. By nothing more than understanding, yet it felt strong, like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing one more step could change everything. I finally got up to go. His eyes followed me, not heavy but steady. "Thank you," he said simply, "for listening." I walked out of his office with my heart racing, the sunlight bright. As I stepped into the hall, I wasn't sure what I was taking with me. But I knew it was something I could never fully put down again. The days after felt strangely heavy, like the air around me had a quiet tightness. Only I could feel. I tried to get back to my normal days, making meals, taking care of the garden, having small talks with my husband over morning coffee. But under it all, my thoughts kept going back to Michael. Not to him as a guy with power, not even as my husband's boss, but as someone who had shown a truth so real that I couldn't forget it. It wasn't being drawn to him that pulled at me, it was something harder to explain. It was like he had opened a door in me I didn't know was shut. I found myself remembering his words in the quietest times, like when I folded clothes or looked out the kitchen window at the late summer light fading across the yard, feeling sorry choices, the hurt of what might have been. Those feelings weren't new to me. They lived in the corners of my own heart too. One evening, my husband came home late, his shoulders tight from the load of endless meetings. He talked fast, hardly stopping between sentences, like telling about his day was a job he needed to finish before resting. I listened, nodding, giving gentle smiles, but inside I felt a gap. He didn't notice the quiet in my answers. He didn't notice that my eyes wandered, that my heart was somewhere else, that scared me. A few days later, the phone rang. I knew the number right away, and my breath stopped. Michael's voice on the other end was calm, careful, but there was a pause, like he thought twice about calling. "I wanted to say sorry," he said quietly. "I shouldn't have put you in that spot the other day. It wasn't fair." For a moment, I thought about agreeing with him, stepping back, keeping my life safe. But instead, I said sometimes being real is needed, even if it feels unfair. There was a quiet long enough for me to hear the faint tick of the clock in my living room. Then he replied, "Would you meet me not for work, just to talk?" I should have said no. I knew that, but something inside me, something restless and not full, whispered yes before I could stop it. We planned to meet the next afternoon at a quiet cafe in a corner of the city, a spot where no one would think to see us together. When I got there, the cafe smelled of roasted coffee beans and fresh baked goods, the kind of nice smell that should have calmed the knot in my stomach. But didn't. Michael was already there, sitting by the window, sunlight outlining the silver bits in his hair. When he saw me, he stood, his face soft but unsure. We sat across from each other, hot mugs between us, and for a long time neither of us talked. It wasn't weird, it was careful on purpose, like we both knew whatever words we picked would shape something we couldn't take back. Finally, he said, "You remind me of what I lost." His voice shook a little. "Not you exactly, but the feeling, the closeness I let go when I picked work over love, trying to get ahead over family. When I look at you, I see the life I should have protected." His truth hit me hard. It wasn't a big statement of wanting, but something more mixed up, more hurtful. It was a mirror. I felt my throat get tight as I thought of my own marriage, the years of steady being together, the habits, the comfort, but also the empty spots, the times when I wanted deeper talks for softness that had quietly turned into routine. I reached for my coffee, my hands shaking a bit. "Do you know what scares me?" I whispered. "That I understand exactly what you mean, that I felt it too. Even if I never said it out loud." Our eyes met then, and it was like the world outside the cafe vanished. We weren't husband and wife, boss and worker. We were two people seeing the quiet hurt of lives half lived. In some ways, neither of us moved closer. Neither of us crossed the line that kept respect from betrayal, but the feeling closeness was real, and in some ways even more risky. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff together, looking down into the deep parts, knowing one wrong step could change everything. When we finally left, we walked quietly to the street Air was warm, buzzing with late afternoon cars, but between us there was only the heaviness of what had been said. He looked at me once more before walking away. "Take care of yourself," he said softly as I drove home. My heart ached in a way I couldn't quite name. I knew I was carrying something breakable, something I couldn't share with anyone, not even my husband. Especially not him. The night after the cafe meeting, I sat alone in the living room. Long after my husband had gone to bed, the house was quiet, covered in the soft light of one lamp, and I could hear the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. I had stepped into a place inside myself I didn't know. Was there a place of wanting, of seeing things, of truths I had tried to hide? I thought about Michael's words, about the sadness in his eyes, about the way he talked of feeling sorry, like it was a friend he couldn't shake. I thought about how without trying he had given words to something I had felt too, the hurt of moments lost, of softness, slipping away, of a life that had become steady, but quiet, predictable, but sometimes lonely. The next morning as I poured coffee, I looked at my husband sitting across from me. He was reading the paper, glasses on the end of his nose, his forehead wrinkled in focus. A man I had shared many years with, a man who knew me in ways no one else ever could. I realized then that while Michael's sharing had stirred something deep in me, it wasn't about him. It was about me, about what I wanted, about what I was afraid of losing. Later that week, I found myself back in Michael's office, this time by chance. My husband had asked me to come for another normal meeting, and though I thought I was ready, seeing him still sent a wave through me. His eyes met mine for the shortest moment, and I saw it all again, the truth, the heaviness, the feeling sorry. But this time, I also saw his understanding. He knew, like I did, that we could not, and should not go further into what had started between us. When the meeting ended, I stayed a moment by the door. Michael's voice reached me, quiet enough that only I could hear. "Thank you for listening, for seeing me. I won't forget it." I nodded, my throat tight, unable to make words, and then I left. That was the last real talk we had. And maybe it was just how it needed to be in the weeks after. I turned my thoughts inside. Instead of holding the weight of his sharing quietly, I started to think about what it had shown in me. I talked more openly with my husband, gently at first, about the little things. How much I missed our long walks, how I wished we would stay longer over dinner, like we used to. To my surprise, he listened. He put down his phone, folded away the paper, and looked at me in a way that felt new again. We started to rebuild small moments together. A shared laugh in the kitchen while cooking, a slow dance in the living room when an old song came on the radio. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real, and I realized then that Michael's sharing, though painful, had been a gift. It had made me face the quiet wanting in my own heart and reminded me not to let what mattered most slip away. Life teaches us, through people we don't expect, through meetings that are quick but strong. Michael had been that for me, not something to tempt me, not a danger, but a mirror. A reminder that time is special, that feeling sorry is heavy, and that love once found must be kept safe and grown. As I sit here now looking at my husband across the table, his hand resting near mine, I feel a softness I thought had gotten dim. I reach for his hand and he smiles, surprised but warm. The connection is still there. It was only waiting for us to notice it again. And though Michael's words will always echo faintly in my memory, what I choose to carry forward is the lesson to live fully in the love I already have, and to never let silence seal the moments that matter.